August 16, 2018. The Colorado sun beats down on an empty oil field outside Frederick. Police officers stand in a circle staring at a map. One finger points to a location. That's where they are. Hours earlier, Christopher Watts had been sitting in an interrogation room. Sweat dripped down his face. His story was falling apart. For 2 days he'd played the worried husband on television, begging for his family's safe return. Now, he was drawing circles on a photograph, marking spots in the dirt. His pregnant wife, Shanann, his 4-year-old daughter, Bella, his 3-year-old daughter, Celeste, all gone, all dead, and he knew exactly where they were. When investigators arrived at the oil site that night, they found something no parent should ever see. 2 small bodies pushed through 8-inch openings into crude oil tanks. A shallow grave nearby, a bedsheet that matched the ones from the Watts home. This wasn't a missing persons case anymore. This was murder, and the man responsible had looked into the cameras just hours before, asking for help finding his family. How does a father kill his own children? What happens in a person's mind that allows them to do the unthinkable? And how did a seemingly normal life in suburban Colorado end in one of the most disturbing family murders in recent American history? Before we begin, if you enjoy deep dives into true crime cases, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring you more content. Christopher Lee Watts was born on May 16, 1985, in Spring Lake, North Carolina. Spring Lake is a small town near Fort Bragg, a military base. It's the kind of place where everybody knows everybody. Chris grew up with his parents, Ronnie and Cindy Watts, and his younger sister, Jamie. From the outside, the Watts family looked normal, but Chris was different from other kids. He was quiet, really quiet. While other children ran around and played, Chris stayed in the background. He didn't have many friends. Social situations made him uncomfortable, so he avoided them. Teachers noticed this about him. He was smart, incredibly smart. One of his high school teachers later said Chris had a photographic memory. He could remember things after seeing them just once. He did well in school without trying too hard, but despite his intelligence, he never stood out. He blended into the walls. Chris wasn't the type to speak up in class or join clubs. He wasn't an athlete. He wasn't popular. He was just there. People who knew him described him as nice, polite, the kind of person who wouldn't hurt anyone. Looking back, that's what makes this case so disturbing. Nobody saw it coming. As Chris grew older, his quiet personality continued. He didn't date much in high school. He didn't get into trouble. He was the perfect child, at least on paper. But being perfect on the outside doesn't always mean everything is okay on the inside. In 2010, Chris's life changed. He met Shanann Razuchek through Facebook. Shanann was from Aberdeen, North Carolina, not far from Spring Lake. She was different from Chris in almost every way. Where he was quiet, she was outgoing. Where he avoided attention, she loved being in front of the camera. She posted constantly on social media, sharing every moment of her life. Shanann was a saleswoman for a multi-level marketing company called Lavelle. She sold a product called Thrive, which included vitamins, shakes, and lifestyle products. She was good at her job. She made videos, held meetings, and built a network of customers and other sellers. Her online presence was huge. She shared everything: her meals, her workouts, her relationship with Chris. Chris fell for her immediately. For someone who spent his life in the shadows, Shanann brought light. She was confident, ambitious, and full of energy. 2 years after they met, on November 3, 2012, they got married in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. Soon after, they moved to Colorado. Chris got a job at Anadarko Petroleum, working as an operator at oil sites. Shanann continued her work with Lavelle from home. In 2013, they bought a 5-bedroom house in Frederick, Colorado. The address was 2825 Saratoga Trail. It was a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood. It seemed like the perfect place to start a family. On December 17, 2013, their first daughter was born. They named her Bella Marie Watts. Chris and Shanann were over the moon. Shanann posted dozens of photos and videos of Bella online. She documented every milestone: first smile, first steps, first words. Less than 2 years later, on July 17, 2015, their second daughter arrived, Celeste Catherine Watts, nicknamed Cece. Now they had two beautiful girls. Shanann's social media showed a picture-perfect family, Chris smiling with his daughters. Family trips, birthday parties, holidays, everything looked ideal. But behind the scenes, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. In 2015, the same year Cece was born, the Watts family filed for bankruptcy. Despite the nice house and the happy photos, they were drowning in debt. The pressure was building. Shanann's job required her to travel often for business meetings and conferences. She'd be gone for days at a time, leaving Chris alone with the girls. To the outside world, Chris seemed like a devoted father. Neighbors saw him playing with Bella and Cece in the yard. He seemed patient and loving. But something was changing inside Chris. Years of being quiet, of holding everything in, of living in someone else's shadow, were starting to take their toll. He began to feel trapped. The debt, the responsibility, the constant social media posts about their perfect life. It was all becoming too much. In early 2018, Chris met someone at work. Her name was Nicole Kessinger. She worked as a geologist for Anadarko. Unlike Shanann, Nicole was quiet and kept to herself. She didn't blast her life all over social media. She was simple, easy to be around, and she didn't know Chris was married with 2 kids. Chris lied to Nicole. He told her he was separated and in the process of getting divorced. She believed him. Why wouldn't she? Chris was soft-spoken, kind, and seemed genuine. They started dating. By the summer of 2018, Chris was living a double life. At home, he was the family man. He played with his daughters, went to work, came home. But every chance he got, he was with Nicole. He texted her constantly. He made plans for their future together. He started working out, losing weight, trying to look better for her. People at work noticed the change in him. He seemed happier, more confident. Shanann noticed something was off too. Her husband was different, distant, cold. They started fighting more. In text messages to friends, Shanann admitted that Chris had changed. He didn't seem interested in her anymore. He barely touched her. He spent more time on his phone than with his family. In June 2018, Shanann went to North Carolina with Bella and Cece for a 6-week visit with her family. Chris stayed in Colorado, supposedly to work. But really, he was spending all his time with Nicole. For those 6 weeks, Chris got a taste of freedom. No responsibilities, no kids, no wife, just him and his girlfriend. When Shanann came back in early August, reality hit Chris hard. His family was home. His double life couldn't continue. He had to make a choice. And the choice he made was unforgivable. On August 12, 2018, Shanann flew to Arizona for a business trip. She was 15 weeks pregnant with their 3rd child, a boy they planned to name Nico. While she was gone, Chris stayed home with Bella and Cece, but his mind was somewhere else. He was texting Nicole, looking at apartments, planning a future that didn't include his family. Shanann returned home in the early morning hours of August 13th. Her friend and colleague, Nicole Atkinson, drove her home from the airport. They arrived at 1:48 a.m. Shanann was exhausted but happy to be home. Nicole watched her walk through the front door. It was the last time anyone except Chris would see her alive. What happened next is still hard to comprehend. According to Chris's later confession, he and Shanann got into an argument about their relationship. She suspected he was having an affair. The fight escalated. Chris claims that's when he snapped. He strangled Shanann on their bed. She fought back, but he was stronger. Within minutes, she was dead. But the nightmare didn't end there. Bella, their 4-year-old daughter, walked in. She saw her father standing over her mother's body. Chris told her that Mommy wasn't feeling well. Then he did something no parent should ever do. He loaded Shanann's body into his work truck. He put Bella and Cece in the back seat without their car seats. The little girls were alive. They asked about their mother. Chris lied to them. He drove 45 minutes to a remote oil site owned by Anadarko, where he worked. When they arrived at the oil field, Chris carried out the rest of his plan. He smothered Bella and Cece with his bare hands, one after the other, his own daughters. 4-year-old Bella fought back. She struggled. The medical examiner would later find scratches on her body from being pushed through the small opening of an oil tank. A tuft of her blonde hair was found stuck on the edge. Chris shoved both girls' bodies through 8-inch hatches into crude oil tanks. Then he buried Shanann in a shallow grave nearby. He covered her with dirt and drove home. It was barely dawn. The sun was just starting to rise, and Christopher Watts had just murdered his entire family. When Chris got home, he acted like nothing had happened. A neighbor's security camera caught him that morning, loading a gas can into his truck and backing into his garage. At the time, nobody knew what it meant. But later, that footage would help police understand what really happened. Later that morning, Shanann's friend Nicole tried to reach her. Shanann had a doctor's appointment scheduled. She also had a business meeting. When Shanann didn't show up and didn't answer her texts, Nicole got worried. This wasn't like Shanann. She always answered her phone. At around 12:10 p.m., Nicole drove to the Watts house. She knocked on the door. No answer. She rang the doorbell. Nothing. She called Chris, who was at work. He told her he didn't know where Shanann was. He said he'd left for work early that morning and hadn't seen her since. Nicole called the police. By 1:40 p.m., a Frederick police officer arrived to do a welfare check. Chris came home from work and let the officer search the house. They found the family dog, alone and unharmed. Shanann's car was in the garage with the girl's car seat still inside. Her purse was sitting on the counter with her keys and medicine inside. Her phone was wedged between the couch cushions. Her wedding ring was on the bedside table. Everything suggested that Shanann hadn't left the house, but Chris insisted he had no idea where his family was. That evening, Chris did something that would later haunt him. He went on television. Multiple news stations interviewed him outside his house. He stood there, wringing his hands, pleading for his family's safe return. "Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back," he said. "I just want everybody to come home." He looked nervous. His voice cracked. But to some viewers, something felt off. He didn't seem genuinely upset. He seemed uncomfortable, like he was reading from a script. Shanann's mother watched the interview from North Carolina. She knew immediately. Something was wrong with Chris. She told investigators she suspected him from the very beginning. A mother's intuition. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search on August 14th. This was now a major missing persons case. Investigators started digging into Chris's story. They pulled phone records, checked bank accounts, reviewed social media. Everything pointed back to Chris. Then they discovered something important. Chris had been having an affair. Nicole Kessinger came forward and cooperated with police. She told them everything. Chris had lied to her. She had no idea he was still married with kids. She thought he was separated. When she found out what happened, she was horrified. Investigators also found something on Shanann's phone. She had been using an app to track her pregnancy. She'd been texting friends about problems in her marriage. The pieces were falling into place. On August 15th, Chris was brought in for questioning. Police asked him to take a polygraph test. He agreed. The results came back. Deception indicated. He failed the test. Confronted with the results, Chris's story started to change. He admitted he'd been having an affair. He admitted he wanted a divorce. But he still insisted he didn't know where his family was. Finally, detectives told him they knew he was lying. They had evidence, security footage, phone records, witness statements. It was over. That's when Chris called his father. With police listening, he confessed. But even in his confession, he lied. He told his father that he'd killed Shanann, but only because she had killed the girls. He claimed he'd walked in and found Shanann strangling Cece on a baby monitor. He said he'd seen Bella's body and snapped, killing Shanann in a rage. It was a lie, but it was enough for an arrest. On August 16th, Chris was formally arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. He led investigators to the oil site where he'd dumped the bodies. At 11 p.m. that night, police arrived at the location. What they found was devastating. Bella and Cece's bodies were discovered in separate oil tanks. They'd been submerged in crude oil for 3 days. Shanann's body was buried in a shallow grave nearby. The medical examiner's report revealed the horrific truth. The girls had been alive when Chris took them to that oil field. He'd murdered them there. Bella had scratches on her body. She'd fought back. The autopsy revealed that she'd been aware of what was happening to her. It's impossible to imagine her final moments. Her own father, someone she trusted and loved, took her life. The community was shocked. Frederick is a small town. Everybody knew the Watts family. They seemed normal, happy. How could this happen? As more details emerged, the lies in Chris's story became obvious. Security footage showed that Shanann never left the house the morning of August 13th. She couldn't have killed the girls. Chris had killed all three of them. On August 21st, prosecutors added more charges: unlawful termination of a pregnancy for killing unborn Nico, and 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. For months, Chris sat in jail maintaining his story. But in November 2018, he changed his tune. He finally told the truth. He admitted he'd killed Shanann during an argument about divorce. He admitted that Bella had walked in during the murder. He admitted he'd loaded his daughters into his truck while they were still alive. He admitted he'd driven them to the oil field and killed them there, one after the other. On November 6, 2018, Chris pleaded guilty to all charges. The district attorney had been considering the death penalty, but Shanann's family asked them not to pursue it. They didn't want any more death. They just wanted justice and closure. On November 19th, Chris stood in court for sentencing. Shanann's family members read victim impact statements. Her mother, father, and brother spoke about the pain of losing Shanann, Bella, and Cece. They talked about the lives that were stolen, the milestones the girls would never reach, the grandson they'd never meet. The judge sentenced Chris to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, 3 to be served consecutively. He also received 48 years for unlawful termination of pregnancy and 36 years for tampering with the bodies. In total, Chris Watts will spend the rest of his life in prison. He will never be free. In December 2018, Chris was transferred to Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. Due to security concerns, that's where he remains today. The Watts family murders shocked the nation. Shanann's social media posts, which had once shown a picture-perfect family, became evidence in a murder case. People watched her videos knowing what would happen. It was haunting. In the months and years after his sentencing, Chris gave several interviews from prison. He confessed to even more disturbing details. In letters to a pen pal, he admitted that he'd planned the murders for weeks. He admitted to giving Shanann OxyContin, hoping it would end her pregnancy. He admitted he'd tried to smother the girls in their beds at home first, but couldn't go through with it. These revelations made the case even more disturbing. This wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't a moment of rage. It was premeditated. Chris had thought about it, planned it, and carried it out. The case raised important questions about family violence, about the dangers of keeping up appearances, and about how well we really know the people around us. Neighbors, friends, and co-workers all said the same thing. They never saw it coming. Chris seemed like a normal guy, a good father, a quiet, polite man. But underneath that quiet exterior was someone capable of the unthinkable. Experts have tried to understand what drives someone to commit familicide, the murder of one's entire family. It's rare. Most family annihilators, according to FBI profilers, kill themselves after murdering their families. Chris didn't. He tried to get away with it. He lied. He went on TV. He played the victim. Some believe Chris felt trapped by his life. The debt, the responsibilities, the constant social media presence, the affair. Instead of getting a divorce like a normal person, he chose murder. He chose to erase his family so he could start over. But there's no logic that can make sense of it. There's no explanation that makes it okay. Chris Watts made a choice, and that choice destroyed multiple lives forever. Shanann Watts was 34 years old. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a mother. Bella was 4. Celeste was 3. Nico never got a chance to be born. Their lives mattered. Their stories matter. And while Christopher Watts will spend the rest of his life behind bars, nothing can bring them back. This case reminds us that we never truly know what's happening behind closed doors. It reminds us that the perfect life we see on social media isn't always real. And it reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous person is the one you'd never suspect. What do you think about this case? How do you think someone could do something like this to their own family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more true crime deep dives. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.